down all these many weeks that we've been talking about the amazing restoration, all the areas of our lives that God has restored. We're going to boil it down. We're going to talk a little bit about those things, and we're going to make one point. This is the point that I want to make today. This is what I want you to leave with, and I'm going to start with it. Normally, Alan would say this is not the best way to do a talk, just to announce it right up front. But I'm announcing it right front. If you have to leave early, you'll have this with you when you go. It is a so that. Repeat that for me. It's so that. Say that. So that. It is a so that. All this good stuff that God has done in your life and is doing and is going to do, all this renovating and restoring, it is a so that. It's a so that. I wanted just to bring some clarity, and when I think about bringing clarity, I was reminded of a video clip that I love. Do you have that ready to go, Karen? Would you not love to know what she is saying? She clearly is communicating something. She's very clear about what that is. Okay, that's enough. This goes on and on, y'all. We want to bring some clarity today. This we know, God is in control. He's in control of everything, and it is His heart to restore. It is the heart of your God. It is the very nature of our God to restore. Every broken place, every crumbling place, every abandoned thing in your life, He is on the move, and He is well aware of it, and He is at work. Nothing is by happenstance. There is no such thing as coincidence. Now, you can call it that if you want, but let me tell you who you belong to. You belong to the Most High God. And everything in your life, He's got right here. There's nothing that's happening. He cares about the sparrows, right? He cares about the wrens. We had a wren get in our house the other day, and I was not home, but Alan chased it around for a couple hours. Literally, more than a couple hours. And he called me and told me, and I said, well, I can't come home until you get the bird out of the house. I can't be running around, it'll get in my hair. I can't be in the house with a bird. So he was waving mops and brooms and throwing sheets, and he'd sent me to the Ace Hardware to get a net, and he called me and just said, Anne, this was after hours, y'all. He said, I think I'm going to get the tennis racket. Yes, that's exactly what I did. I said, God cares about the sparrows. We managed to avoid, we did get it out. He became, he would say, the bird whisperer. And he prayed it out of the house. He'll have to tell you about that sometime, and you'll probably hear it in a sermon at some point. I don't want to steal his thunder. Okay, God knows even the number of the hairs on your head. That's not me saying that. That's the Word of God. He wants you to know that. He's in control of everything, and He knows everything. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Right? And He has a magnificent, intentional plan for your life. From the foundation of the world, He had a magnificent, intentional plan for your life. He is restoring and has restored so that you can say, I am seeing the goodness of God. This is what David said. I want to see the goodness of God in the land of the living. You see what God's doing in your life and the restoration He's bringing, and you see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And it increases our faith. And that might be enough for you. But I'm telling you, that's just part A of the plan. God is restoring, and God is renovating, and God is doing amazing work in your life so that you can walk out the calling that He has on your life. You have a call on your life. Every woman in this room has a call on her life. I will repeat that. Every woman in this room has a call on her life. And you don't have just one call. You have a lot of calls on your life. I'm called to be a mother. I'm called to be a wife. I have other callings, and they change. You might accomplish one calling, and it'll give you another calling. Now, I get nervous when I start talking about calling because I can tell you some women hear it this way. I got to get out there. I got to do something. God has something for me to do. I don't know what it is, but I got to get out there and do it. And I'm a mess. So I can't do it. I'm just going to fly under the radar. I'm going to try to fly under the radar. She has no idea how much I've messed up. And so that's, she's talking to most of those women. But, no. We're going to see today God has a call on your life. It doesn't matter how far you are trying to run from Him. It does not matter what type of rebellion you're involved in. It doesn't matter what kind of wickedness. God has a call on your life. And He is about posturing you and equipping you for that call. Ladies, we're going to change the world. We are going to change the world. And we're going to do that because God's given us a call and He's equipped us for it. He's not saying, now get on out there. He's saying, let me fill you up. He told the disciples, He said, don't go anywhere until Pentecost. Don't do anything. You just wait in this room till I come and empower you. He is restoring and working in your life so that you are postured for your call. He takes those ruins. We talked about the ruins, and they might be waist deep, they might be neck deep, they might be ankle deep, whatever the ruins in your life. And He builds a mound known as a tel in Hebrew so that you are better positioned for what He's calling you to do. Do you see that? We could go back through every single one of the areas of restoration that we've talked about, and we could say, I see it. It's a so that. God was doing that so that. He's working in that area. He says, we know that all things, Romans 8:28. That's not a few things. That's all things. All things. I looked up the word in the Greek. It's pas, P-A-S, or the way we spell it in English, and it literally means all, without exception. Jesus says throughout the New Testament, I accomplished all things, pause. He's not talking about some things that need to be accomplished. He's talking about all things. And in Romans, Paul said, we know that all things work together for our good. He is bringing it all together as only He can. He knows what needs to be restored in your life. I don't even want to know what needs to be restored in my life. I don't even want to know. I just can pray, Lord, just restore. There are places in me that desperately need restoration that I might not recognize. And I don't necessarily need them brought to my attention. Right? I don't want to know. Ladies, it doesn't matter what house you live in. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in. It does not matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your ethnicity. You have a call on your life. You have a call on your life. It's a so that. God knows everything, and He is working in everything. I'm going to start talking faster and faster. One of my there'll be a podcast. You can watch it again, and you can slow it down. I can go lower. We had a couple in our church that some years ago brought a niece to church. She was Jewish, and she did not know the Lord. And they would bring her to church, and then they would kind of unpack the service with her and share the gospel with her. And this went on for some weeks. She was a young woman, very, very small, petite young woman. And they would share the gospel with her. And after a number of Sundays, they went home one Sunday afternoon. I think the sermon had been particularly poignant that day. They talked about the sermon, and they continued to share about it and talk about the gospel with her throughout the afternoon. And that evening, Sunday evening, she accepted Christ. This young woman was a lover of the jumble. Is anybody... I'll just tell you what the jumble is. It's in the paper. I don't really do the jumble, but my husband thinks it's wonderful. It's a bunch of scrambled words. And you unscramble the letters, and they make a word. So you take this scrambled word and you letters, and you make a word. And there are 4 of those. And then there's a 5th one that you take a couple letters out of each of the unscrambled words, and you make a 5th word. You figure out what the 5th word is by a clue that they'll give you. So that's the jumble. So the next morning, this young woman has accepted Christ. She goes out, she gets the paper, she opens it up, and there's the jumble. The first word were the letters P-H-L-Y-S. Those were the letters she had to unscramble. When she unscrambled them, it made the word sylph. Sylph. A sylph is a small, diminutive person. A petite woman. The second set of letters, C-E-E-N-I, C-E-E-N-I, unscrambled, it's the word niece. The third word on this morning after she's accepted Christ were the letters S-P-E-G-O-L, and unscrambled, it's the word gospel. The fourth word, the letters were E-N-C-O-S-H, and when unscrambled, it's the word chosen. The last word, when unscrambled, was a long word, but she figured it out. It was the word speechless. Now, you might say, well, why did God do that? You know, I mean, she'd accepted Christ, right? I think God was wanting to say, let me just tell you, I see you. I know everything about you. I knew this day would come before the foundation of the world. I knew when this paper was planned. I knew when this jumble was written, weeks ago, months ago, whenever the paper was planned. I knew that the morning after you accepted Jesus, you would walk out and you would pick up your paper. And I want to confirm to you that I see it all, that I'm in it all. We've seen that God restores our lives. We've seen that God restores our time. Just amazing. So not only does He restore the stuff that's been stolen from us in the time, He restores the time. Ashley did an amazing job of sharing about this. But it's so that He says, I will restore the time that the locusts have eaten. But if you read 3 verses further into Joel 2, verse 28, he says, and afterward, I'm going to restore that time because afterward, I'm going to pour out my Spirit on all flesh. And there'll be prophesying, and there'll be visions, and there'll be dreams, and amazing things will happen because I restore. It's a so that. He restores our true identity. We talked about Mephibosheth. He restores our true home. We are not an imposter in the palace. The invitation is for us to just scoot our chairs up, lame legs and all, under the table of grace and have a feast. At the banqueting table of the King. That's the invitation. But it's a so that. I love, Paul Harvey used to have an old radio show, and his trademark was the rest of the story. Today, that might be a good title, the rest of the story. So Mephibosheth is restored, and he eats always at the banqueting table of the king. And that's kind of where we stopped, but that's not the end of the story for Mephibosheth. I kind of like saying that. Everybody say Mephibosheth. Now say it 5 times fast. Later in Mephibosheth's story, after he's restored, there's a revolt in David's household. And David is the great king who has invited Mephibosheth to eat at his table and been instrumental in that restoration. And there's a revolt in the household of the king, in David's household. And there's a servant who betrays David, and he lies. And he says that Mephibosheth's involved in that betrayal also. And if we read to the end of the story, we found out that Mephibosheth, who's been so radically restored at the king's banqueting table, he's the one person who absolutely refuses to betray David. It's a so that. Beautiful picture of a so that. We're talking about mind-blowing, beyond anything you can imagine, restoration so that God can use you in amazing, magnificent ways. We cannot end our series without looking at some before and after, right? Right? Chip and Joanna Gaines. I had some pictures. This they call a colossal renovation. Here is the house before. Okay? There it is. That's the before house. Just wanted you to get a good picture of it. Okay, next picture. There's the house after. How's that? Okay, so let's see a room in the house. This is inside that house before they started restoration. Next picture. That's after. Okay, next picture. This is a room in the house before restoration. This is after. Okay? I kind of want to just blow your minds. I think that's amazing. They take it. Looks almost like an old tobacco barn that you'd see on the side of the road. And completely restore. God is restoring so that Chip and Joanna Gaines don't restore a dilapidated, decrepit space just so they can move into it. They're not going to move into it. They restore a space to provide a new way of life for the people for whom the renovation is happening. They restore to provide a new way of life. God is restoring you for a purpose. Let me pray. Father, we ask that this word, as we steep and go deep in your word, that you will speak to us. God, I pray that you would, even in the Spirit in this moment, be tilling up our spirits. That you would be pouring out living water so that the seed of your word will go deep, find root, bear a rich harvest. We thank you for this word that you've given us, that you are restoring, that you will restore. God, I pray that you would cause us to apprehend today the rest of that story. That you have great things for each one of us to do in the earth. And you are posturing and healing and empowering for that call. And we thank you for it in the sweet and precious and mighty and wonderful name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Today we're going to look briefly at the book of Jonah, one of my all-time favorite books. Of course, when I talk about Jonah, I kind of go back to, what I learned when I was 4 years old about Jonah and the whale. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but there's so much more to this story. So I want y'all to if you need to reach over and get your thinking cap and put it on. I don't want you to kind of settle in and take a nap because you think you know the story of Jonah. Amazing things happened in Jonah's life, and it's a wonderful portrait of complete restoration so that. Jonah was not just any prophet. He was a famous prophet. According to the book of 2 Kings, he was the prophet who gave accurate forecast about the establishment of Israel's borders. So he is not just any prophet. He's a heralded, famous prophet. And for years, he has prophesied the word of the Lord faithfully and accurately to the people of Israel. He's heralded. And now a different kind of word comes to Jonah. God asks him to preach a message not to the children of Israel, which is the group of people he has always preached to, but to bring a word to their arch enemies. I'm going to start just by reading at the very beginning of Jonah. Jonah 1, the first couple verses in Jonah 1 say, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me." So Jonah runs away. He runs as far as he can run. Nineveh's in the east. Tarshish is in the west. And he says, I am not going to Nineveh. I'm going to Tarshish. And he goes and he gets on a boat. And he's going to go as far as he possibly can. And a great storm comes up, and they're frightened sailors. And Jonah is swallowed by a great fish, and he's spit back on dry land. I'm going to come back and unpack this. Y'all don't have a panic that I'm flying through it. I am. Okay, time's up. Let's pray. Here's what we read in Jonah 3, verses 1 and 2, which is your memory verse. It's on your card. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. And I wanted to start with this verse. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. The calling is irrevocable. God has told Jonah what he wants him to do, and Jonah has done the opposite. He has rebelled. And yet, God doesn't say, okay, Sue, come over here. I'm going to send you to Nineveh. No. The calling of God on your life is irrevocable. He has things for you to do, and he is positioning you to accomplish those things. Even in the reality of Jonah's faithlessness. And it's a picture of that. You can't say, ladies, well, I missed it. I had a call on my life and I should have done it, but I didn't. We tend to have that thought. Or I'm a failure. Or I have too much sin in my life. How's God going to use me? What kind of a call is going to be on my life and accomplished in my life? The calling of God is irrevocable. It's no matter how far you may run away. No matter how far you may be trying to run away. You know you can't outrun him. You can not outrun the love of God. The Hesed. You remember we talked about that? Psalm 23 ends that way. Surely goodness and mercy. Literally, surely goodness and Hesed. And that's the steadfast love of the Lord. Will chase me down. We interpret it very nicer. Will follow me. But literally means chase me down. no matter what has happened to you in your life, no matter what you have walked through, we get into the negative stuff and negative stinking thinking, and we disqualify ourselves. And I want to say up front, there is nothing that you have done that has disqualified you for your call. God is totally committed to restoring and posturing and equipping you. Jonah's beautiful literature. It's woven together, beautiful words and phrases that help, they tie together concepts and themes in the book of Jonah. One of those is that you see as you read the book of Jonah is all about going down. Jonah goes down, and he goes down, and he goes down. He goes down to Joppa, and he gets on a boat. He goes into the bottom of the boat, down into the boat. He goes down into the water. He goes down into the belly of the whale. It's a portrait of a man going down, which is contrasted by the greatness and magnificence of his God in this story, who follows him around and raises him up. Stark contrast. God raises Jonah up. He brings him up. He brings him out of the depths. Isn't it the intent of humanity to go down? And isn't it the intent of our magnificent God to raise up? If we read on in Jonah chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. Another theme that we see in the book of Jonah is great. God sends, there's a great city, Nineveh. And then we see a great wind. Then we're going to see a great fish. This whole idea of the greatness of God as opposed to this going down. It's a picture of God's intentional plan. There's a great wind, and it's appointed by God. It's sent by God. Have you ever been blessed by a storm? Anybody ever had rain? Years ago, we were in San Francisco, and we were in San Francisco to watch my niece, who danced with the San Francisco Ballet, to see her dance. And I wanted to see her dance. It was the reason we were in San Francisco. But we wanted to do everything you can possibly do when you're in San Francisco in about an 8-hour period. So we were driving all around, and we got to running late, and we were going to miss. Because of the traffic, we were going to miss it. And I was having, you know how you are. Alan's driving, I'm in the passenger seat. Go, 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 speed, speed. Drive on the median. Right? I just, if we get pulled, you can stay with the officer. Explain. I'll jog. So we're driving along, and it starts to rain. And I thought, oh, no, it's bad enough we're going to be late, but now it's raining. But it was an outdoor performance. And you know what the rain did? Postponed it. They postponed that performance. So it was okay that we were running late. And we got to see Courtney dance, and it was amazing. It's amazing. It was one of those things I want to turn to everybody and say, pinch me, pinch me. Right? But because we were running late, because of the rain, it had stopped raining, so it wasn't actually raining on us, but because it elongated the performance, I had to go to the restroom before we left. We were going to get back in that traffic, and so I went to the restroom. Quick trip before we left the park. And while I was standing in line, there was a Buddhist woman in front of me. And as God had ordained it, she knew of Courtney, and we were able to strike up a conversation, and I was able to share the love of Jesus with a Buddhist woman in San Francisco. Do you know why? Because it had rained. Sometimes God will allow stuff and do stuff that we don't understand because He's positioning us. He's positioning us. Say to your neighbor, I'm positioned. You are positioned just like you are blessed and highly favored for what God has for you to do in this earth. You aren't too old to do that thing. You are not too young to do that thing. Don't despise the days of small beginnings. Don't despise your youth. God has things for you to do. And He is equipping and posturing. And there's a great wind, and the sailors are afraid, and Jonah's asleep. Can you hear the whisper? Many years hence, there'll be another messenger of God, and there'll be a great wind and a violent storm, and the sailors will be afraid, and yet he'll be sleeping. Do you hear the whisper? We could talk about Jonah for days. We'll just have to do a study on Jonah sometimes. But the captain wakes Jonah up and said, who's responsible for making all this trouble for us? And Jonah says, I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. Verse 12, pick me up and throw me into the sea. That's just what you're going to have to do. Pick me up and throw me into the sea. And Jonah says, and I know, because he says in the book of Jonah, I know He's a gracious and good God. Throw me into the sea, it'll stop. They do everything. The sailors are like, no, we don't want to do that. They do everything. They throw all their supplies overboard. They do everything to lighten the load. They pray to their gods. They want Jonah to pray to his God. But the storm continues. And they finally, as a last resort, pick him up and throw him overboard. And just like that, the sea grows calm. The sacrifice has been made. And the storm stops. Jonah prays from the belly of that fish that God sends. God appoints, the word says, a great fish. You see, it's a setup. The whole thing's a setup. God appoints the great fish. We kind of think of it as da-na-na-na-na-na-na. Don't. And it would be kind of scary to be floating around in the ocean on your little raft, when you go out to ride a wave in, and a whale swim up and swallow you. Okay? None of us may be wanting that as plan A for our beach trip this summer. Nonetheless, God saves Jonah with this fish. He appoints the fish, this great fish, to come and swallow Jonah. And this is what Jonah prays. He says, from the depths of the grave I called for help. You hurled me into the deep, into the very heart of the sea, and currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath me barred me forever. The deep surrounded me. Have you ever felt that way? I'm sinking down. I have said those very words to my husband. I'm sinking down. Talked to a woman this week, and she said, I was in such a dark place that in this bubble, in this mass of darkness, there was no light. There was no light. The deep surrounded me. Jonah says, but the Lord provides. He appoints this great fish. It's part of His intentional plan. And Jonah says this in his prayer. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and He answered me. I called for help, and You listened to my cry. The current swirled about me, the deep surrounded me, but You brought my life up. You raised me up when I was sinking down. You brought my life out of the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer rose to you. This prophet, this much heralded prophet, who now is suicidal, completely depressed, weary. It's actually a picture of self-harm. And he's sinking down, and God's love pursues him into the depths. And God restores him to dry ground. Chapter 2, verse 10 says, "And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land." Not really a beautiful image, but that's what we get. He vomited Jonah. And then in chapter 3, verse 1, the word of the Lord comes to Jonah a second time. Jonah has been saved by God. Jonah has been restored by God. And the word of the Lord comes again. And Jonah says, "You saved me, God. Out of the depths, you raised me up." And the word says that he obeyed the word of the Lord. And he went and he preached to Nineveh, and the people repented, and over 100,000 people were saved. Jonah had a call on his life. It was irrevocable. But God didn't just say, "Go, you're on your own." He postured Jonah. He saved Jonah. He restored Jonah. And he positioned Jonah to walk out the call. We see it over and over. He tells Elijah to go. Elijah, who's depressed and hiding. God sends an angel to bring bread and food and water to Elijah. And he said, "Nourish yourself, eat this, because you have a journey ahead of you. And I'm nourishing you and getting you ready for that." He restored Peter, and Peter preaches the sermon at Pentecost. God has things for each one of us in this room to accomplish in this earth. Mothering and wifing and neighboring, loving well, and specific calls on each one of us. And he will change the world. That's his plan. Through us.